All right. Hello, everybody. I think everything is live and I set everything to auto post saying that we're live at 12:30. Woo! All right. So it is, so I'm technically 1 minute early. And so I don't want to go too much into everything in case anybody's joining us live, but most people do watch this later. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. Welcome to Pro Life, Pro Liberty Live. Election edition. I kind of had hoped, I knew it was going to be a crazy election, guys. I didn't think we were going to have a winner or anything announced, Tuesday night, but I kind of was like, okay, by Saturday, by the time I live stream, we'll be, no. So I know about an hour or so ago, several news stations, including Associated Press, have called Biden as the winner for this election. That we're going to talk about that. And that does not really change anything I was planning to talk about today. So I saw that news come across. I was like, whoa. And then I'm like, well, it doesn't really change anything. So remember that the news media does not actually decide the winner. They think they do. They would like to decide the winner, but that they don't actually get to come to that conclusion. Before I go into too much of what I have for today, or what I want to talk about, I do want to direct your attention to the links in the description below. In addition to all the normal links, let me scroll down. Yeah, so we have like my Tumblr, my Twitter, my Parler, and then we also have and my coffee. So like kind of like you can buy people a coffee kind of thing. And so in addition to all those, there's Pyrography Commissions. And so I've talked to this, I've showed you some of my work before on this channel. But pyrography is wood burning. It's where you take a hot tipped iron, and soldering irons are very similar to what you use for this. In fact, the pyrography kit that I have can be used for soldering. But you etch designs into wood with that. And so I picked this up this year. I've kind of had some fun with it. And when I posted my first piece that I really worked on, a few people were like, hey, I'd like one of those, or I'd like something like that. And so I created a commission form, and I've gotten some commissions, and I really appreciate everybody who has commissioned pieces from me. So I just wanted, and I've posted about, and I've talked about it on the channel before. I actually just got another commission order today, which is awesome. So I'll be working on that this week and next week. And I'll be connecting with that person to make sure everything is good on that order. But I wanted to go ahead and show you the form if you are interested in a pyrography commission. So you can kind of see some of what you can kind of see some of the options here. And I thought I had, I'm going to go see if I can pull it up on my Tumblr, because I know I thought I had a picture, an example of my work on the form, but I guess I do not. So let me go to my Tumblr and pull that up for you. Sorry about that. So, but if you go and click on that link, oh my goodness, I hate when I have my Tumblr window too small, and then Tumblr thinks that I am on mobile or something. So hold on. But if you go down on the form, you can see some of the different size and dimension pieces that I did. The last order that I did was I did some coasters, and so it was these the round wooden slices, like the wooden circles. Let's see. There we go. So I put it on my Tumblr. That's what it was. All right. Here we go. Aha. So this is my Tumblr, obviously, and then I posted this a while ago, and I should probably reblog it with an update. But this was my first piece that I did, and it's Live, Laugh, Lord of the Rings. I thought it'd be funny. It was mostly I'd done the border, and I posted that on Tumblr. In fact, if I scroll down, I think you'll probably see, yeah, so there was the original, there's the border. And I kind of asked for suggestions, or I put a couple of ideas out there and people gave their feedback. And so then it became this. And so, so this is the form here, put that back up. So the form here is if you are interested in ordering a piece. And so these are some of the options that I have now. If you have something more specific, if you have something that you're like, oh, I really, really want this, please let me know, because I can do things that are more custom, or I can do something that's a little bit different. I thought about adding picture frames to the mix. I'm trying to keep the options simple right now because each of these requires me to buy new supplies. And so I don't want to buy too many different supplies and then not have people order those. So I kind of wanted to keep it simple. But again, if you have something specific that you have in mind, feel free to reach out through the form. You can kind of go, you can kind of select one of these and then just tell me in the additional notes, like, hey, I'd be interested in this other thing or whatever. So, and then, yeah, so you just put out, so what you do is you choose your template, you choose your base, and then you choose your font style. So I can do calligraphy like this, which is the most popular option. I can do just like a general cursive, or I can do a, print handwriting. And this is actually an image of my hand, like I just wrote out the alphabet in my handwriting. So this is, that's the handwriting that I have. So if that's what you want. And then if you want a border pattern, I've got a couple of options, such as like swirls, which is what I showed you in the other image. Leaves, you can say no border, or you can say other. So I'd done paw prints before, for instance. So that's an option. So yeah, so anyway, and then you put in your shipping information so that I know where I'm shipping it to. And then what I'm going to do is calculate what the shipping cost is going to be based on the weight of the item and the distance that I'm shipping it and all of that. And then I will email you. So you're going to put in your email up here. And then I will email you with your total quote, which includes both the cost of the item based on the prices that I have up here, and the shipping information, give you a total price, and then you can send me through PayPal. You can send me that. And then I do need you to pay at least partially up front. So I give the option of paying half up front and half when it's ready to ship. But you can also just pay all the way up front. And most people have paid fully up front because they just like, I'm paying for it. That's what it is. So yeah, just so go ahead and put in those orders soon. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because it is November 7th. And I'm just going to look at my calendar here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and a half-ish weeks until Christmas. And if it takes let's estimate that it takes a week to ship, especially once things start getting hectic, especially if the crazy things I'm predicting start to get hectic. This may be even a moot point, but but if things don't go crazy, say it takes about a week to ship, say it takes about a week for me to complete the order, you want to make sure, I would honestly recommend that any orders that you have would be submitted before the end of November at least. And then I will be traveling for Thanksgiving, and I don't think I'm going to be able to bring my pyrography stuff with me. So any orders over Thanksgiving may have to wait until I'm back. So again, that's why I do that, where you don't pay anything until I've confirmed with you. Because if there's some reason where it's like, I'm traveling, or, it's going to be a little delayed for some reason, I want to make sure that you know that before you pay any money. So anyway, so I just got a couple of orders that were for Christmas, that appear to be for Christmas gifts. So Christmas is coming up. If you want Christmas gifts, now's the time. Order those. Okay. So election. There's my little like self-promotion thing out of the way. So, gosh. So I'm pretty sure what I said, and you can go back and check me on this on my previous live streams or on my Tumblr posts. I'm pretty sure what I said is that there would be an initial like, hey, look, I think Trump's going to win this. And then they would also be like, hey, look, we found all these Biden ballots, and there would be craziness. Now, I was expecting more initial riots because I was expecting Trump to appear to have a stronger lead in the beginning. Now, I'm not, so that part I think I was wrong on. But what I wasn't anticipating was how much voter fraud there was going to be and how close this was going to be. I was expecting a sharper division between in-person voting and mail-in ballots, but because enough people mailed their ballots early enough, it did actually work out that a lot of mail-in ballots were counted early, and so it was less of an early decisive lead for Trump. And so what that meant was that election night was very contentious, where there looked like strong possibilities for Trump to win, but things were starting to slip even then. And now in the days after that, we are seeing over and over and over again all these cases of potential voter fraud. Now obviously, it's like you have to say alleged or potential because until you can go and prove it out in a courtroom, a screenshot, a picture, a video, they're circumstantial evidence that, you got to actually prove this out in court. And so there's a lot of rumors floating around, and I want to caution everybody that, yes, I do believe there's fraud. And I do believe the fraud in some of these states, especially like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, maybe even Arizona, is making the difference between a Trump 8-year term, 8-year presidency, another 4 years for Trump versus a few months for Biden and then a 3.5-year term for Kamala Harris. So I do think that there is a distinction here, or I think that the voter fraud does make a difference. The election fraud is making a difference. But I want to caution everybody to be cautious about checking sources before you share things. And I know I have been guilty of that in the past, where I've shared things where I'm like, oh my gosh, this looks crazy. And then someone's like, well, actually, it's not really that, or whatever, And so I do want to be cautious on that, just because I think there are some things where people are jumping in and saying, this looks suspicious, and sharing it without context and sharing it without explanation. So the one that I saw that I talked about on my blog was, there's a video where it's a woman and a man sitting across the table from each other. The woman appears to be filling in ballots. The man is picking up ballots and reading them and setting them aside. Now, the problem is they're wearing masks, so you can't see whether his lips are moving. But what it appears to be to me when I look at this is that the ballots that the man is reading and setting aside, that those appear to be ballots that either were damaged or the marks, the little bubbles were not filled in properly. Because, if you took standardized tests with Scantrons, you have to fill in the bubble all perfectly, and no stray marks and no smudges and whatever. Otherwise, Scantron can't read it. And it's the same thing with these election voting machines, that it can't read, right? It can't read that unless you have every little circle perfect and no stray marks. So if you have a stray mark, if there's something that's going on that the machine can't read it, what this guy is doing is he's reading the ballot to her. She's marking, and because you watch him with his finger, he's moving his finger down the ballot, and she's moving her pen down the ballot, and she's like one spot behind him or whatever, but she's following along on her ballot and marking. So it appears to be ballots that couldn't be read by the scanner and that are being transcribed. Now, is there still potential for fraud there? Could somebody who's got a bias here, could somebody sit there and mark, the wrong thing? Or, might not mark what the voter intended. That's possible, which is why we're supposed to have poll watchers. And that's the thing. And so in this particular video that has been going around, there are poll watchers because it's actually from a live stream. And so if you actually zoom out, and you look, it's like a cropped in video, but if you actually look at the full thing, there are poll watchers who are making sure that nothing weird is going on here, that they actually are marking the right spots. Now, there are other places, there are certain counties, there are certain cities where, and in some of these states that are contested, or where something seems like it's fishy, There are some instances where it appears that, or so far as I'm hearing, that the poll watchers, or specifically the Republican poll watchers, were not allowed, or the ballot watchers were not allowed to come in and observe. And so that is something that is provided for in the law, in all of these places, is that you are allowed to have representatives from each party come in and watch the count and be close enough that they can see what is happening. Not just to be like, oh, look, they're counting ballots, but close enough to be able to see, okay, is somebody, throwing ballots away? Is somebody marking ballots without, they're not transcribing them, or they're not transcribing them fairly? Any other issues like that? Is somebody walking in with a big box of ballots that came from who knows where, that doesn't have chain of custody? So being able to check on those things. And there are some cases where that was denied. And that is my concern here, right? So that's my issue with the fraud, is specifically it's the places where they were not allowed to watch and observe and make sure that nothing was going on. The other concern is some of the machines that were used. So now there's at least one county that had about 6,000 vote error on the machine's end. Like there was a glitch that redirected 6,000 votes from Trump to Biden. And this is in Michigan, I believe. And there's a lot of counties in Michigan that use the same election software, these same election machines that, from my understanding, are both for in-person voting and also for scanning ballots. Like the company makes both kinds of machines, and that's what these counties are using in Michigan. And so the concern is, were there other glitches, were there other errors in Michigan from these machines? Because if it can happen once, it can happen twice. It's like, oh, well, it only happened once. Well, we don't know that unless we can do a full audit and full investigation. And that's what I think is needs to happen at this time, is there has to be a full investigation. There has to be a full audit of the ballots, of everything. We need to be really, taking a good look at this. And I think if for no other reason than because I think for the first time in a long time, or at least the first time since 2000, if not longer, Americans are saying, wait a second, how are our ballots counted? What does happen if a ballot is damaged? What does happen if the election, the electronic machines have a glitch? What happens? What do we do? What's the process for this? And I think we can learn a lot about our election process and learn about what things may need to change for next time. If there are certain processes that we're like, yes, this is the legal process, but you're like, well, wait a second, that doesn't seem right. That may be a conversation with your legislature, saying, wait a second, this isn't how we should be doing things. This has too much potential for fraud, or this has too much potential for error. And so that's where I could see in at least one good result coming out of this, is that I think people are going to scrutinize that process, and hopefully we kind of tighten up some of the things in this process for next time. But even beyond that, as far as I know, Trump has not conceded, and I don't think is planning to concede anytime soon, because there is enough concern about fraud that there is the possibility that if all the fraud is corrected and all the fraud is found and the fraudulent ballots are thrown out, or even potentially a runoff in some states where it's exceptionally close and there's potential for fraud, maybe having a runoff in order to just confirm, yes, this is what the state voted for, and in that, and maybe changing to a different election machine provider, voting machine vendor, if there's a concern about the machines, that sort of thing. And so I do think that that's going to extend out, because not only were these counties in Michigan using these machines, but also that apparently these same machines from a company called Dominion are being used in Pennsylvania and Georgia and Nevada, and I believe North Carolina as well. Don't quote me on that one, but multiple, and I think Wisconsin as well, again, but it seems to be every swing state. Every state that we've been watching for the last few days going, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Has been using these machines, and that a considerable portion of the country using these machines. And how many glitches could there have been? And are the glitches necessarily accidental, right? Is it a bug or a feature? it's worth looking into. Even if you're like, you know what, Biden won, I'll deal with that, whatever. And yeah, I mean, if it turns out that Biden wins and he's our next president, yeah, that sucks. And y'all know I'm not a super big Trump fan. I reluctantly voted for him in 2016, and I didn't vote for him this year. I live in Texas, so don't come after me. Texas went red. Okay, don't come at me. I voted for Joe Jorgensen this year. But I also, as much as I'm not a Trump fan and I didn't want my vote to go to him because I do not approve of many of the things that he's done, and it's not about his language, it's not about any of that. It's honestly about what his administration has done regarding guns. Honestly, that's a big part of it. And that the federal government has continued to grow in size and power under his administration rather than being reduced, which is what we were hoping. We were hoping that he would reduce the size of government. It has only grown. And so I cannot continue to condone that. At the same time, I know Biden, it's like if you're driving toward a cliff, do you want to drive toward the cliff at 80 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour? And you're like, no, stop. Like I want to brake. I want to get my foot off the accelerator. But the two-party system right now provides you, press on the brake or floor it. Like those are your options under the two-party system right now. So anyway, so I'm saying all this as somebody who's not a Trump supporter. I'm not somebody who's out there like, yeah, Trump, and I'm definitely not, putting any of my religious beliefs in attachment to this, because I know that God can use any leader, and that that throughout Scripture, God uses bad leaders to do His will. We're at my church, we're doing a Bible study on the book of Daniel, and you look at Nebuchadnezzar, and it's like God used Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar did terrible things, but God used him, and the book of Daniel makes it very clear, and other books in the Bible make it very clear that God puts people in authority. Even if to us we're like, well, why would you put that person? Like that doesn't make any sense. It's like it's not our call, So if it does end up with Biden being president, I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? It's just going to be like, all right, well, I might, change a little bit what I'm prepping for. And so I want to talk about that a little bit today. But so I think with the election itself, I think what we're going to see is court cases definitely being dragged out for weeks, if not months. So I would buckle in at this point. It's not over. I'm not saying that there's no way that Biden could end up coming out of this a winner. I am saying that it's not over, but you also don't need to refresh, voter counts every 5 minutes. There are a lot of attorneys on Trump's campaign team who are working on this. Rudy Giuliani and several attorneys and several poll watchers and all these people had a press conference today in Pennsylvania. And what was interesting was I had a really hard time watching it live. Because when I went onto YouTube and was like looking for it, there were several YouTube channels from news media, from either NBC or local CBS or all that sort of thing, like local news channels where they put some of their coverage on YouTube. And they were like, oh, Rudy Giuliani press conference at whatever time. And then you watched it and it was about Biden being called as the winner. Because that was the thing is, so Trump says, oh, we're going to have a press conference at 11:30 and, Central Time or whatever, or Eastern Time or whatever. Like we're going to have a press conference at 11:30. And then all the channels are like, oh yeah, press conference. And then like right around the time of the press conference or a few minutes before the press conference, it was, oh, Biden's declared the winner. And so then every network, every channel, including Fox, I believe, I was just kind of skipping through trying to find it, that looked like every single channel didn't cover the press conference, but instead, or at least didn't take it live, but instead just talked about Biden being declared the winner. I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. I'm sorry. Shiroi says, I thought there was a recount happening in the state. How's Biden the winner? Are you talking about Michigan or Pennsylvania? I just want to give you a chance to put that in the chat. Or Wisconsin, because there's a lot of states that are potentially going to have recounts. And that's the thing is there are, I know the Trump campaign is going to be calling for recounts and investigations and lawsuits and all of that in multiple states. And so, okay, Michigan and Pennsylvania. Okay, so yeah, I believe that they are going to be calling for recounts, but that the recount is a multiple week process. And obviously the media, we know the media does not, they're going to push for their narrative, and they clearly have. And that's kind of what I'm saying with the Rudy Giuliani press conference is that, all of a sudden in the midst of all these fraud investigations, in the midst of all these people coming forward and saying there's fraud here, there's fraud here, there's fraud here. In the midst of that, they call the election. Associated Press calls it, followed by all these other networks, including Fox, which I was very disappointed by. And so Rudy Giuliani is like having this press conference, and all the major networks are talking about, Biden's declared the winner. And I'm like, well, wait a second. There's fraud. There's going to be recounts. Like, we can't call that. So there are. So the thing is, Biden is not the winner in the sense that every vote has been counted and every ballot's been certified and everything's been, every county has certified their votes and we've declared him the winner. He's declared the winner by the media. The media has declared him the winner, which in most elections is kind of how we get our news. In most elections, we turn on election coverage on election day evening, and we watch the coverage, and the news media calls different states and says, okay, this state's going to this person, this state's going to this person. We don't question it, because usually it goes about how we expect. And then at the end of the night, they're like, okay, we're calling this person the winner. And we all go to bed going, okay, that person's the winner. And we move on. And then in the next couple of weeks, all the final ballots are counted, all the things are certified. And then they say, yes, we're certifying, yes, this person is the winner. But in this one, we're like, wait a second, something's wrong here. And we're watching this process in a different way than we do before. And we're saying, well, wait a second, what if we can't trust the media? What if the media says, oh, the state's going to this person, the state's going to this person, oh, Biden's the winner, and we can't trust that? How then are we going to figure it out? How then do we decide? And so I think we're kind of wrapping our minds around this, that the news media doesn't actually decide the winner. They don't actually declare the winner. They can announce results, but we don't have all the results, and there's fraud, and there's going to be recounts. So there's going to be all these media stories out there right now where they're going to say, oh, Biden's winning, and Biden's going to have all this stuff, and everybody's going to be cheering. All the Biden people are going to be cheering. But meanwhile, the lawsuits are happening. The requests for recounts are happening. I know there's all this stuff that's going on right now, all these lawyers who are picking through evidence to try and put together their case. What I expect is that these Michigan, Pennsylvania, possibly Wisconsin, possibly Arizona, maybe Nevada, I don't know, that those are all, and Georgia, definitely, Georgia, are all going to end up having either recounts or some investigation into fraud where fraudulent ballots are, fake ballots are identified and thrown out, and then vote counts are adjusted. And we could see either, okay, we've adjusted the vote counts, we've adjusted everything, and oh, look, now Trump's the winner, or maybe Biden's still the winner, but not by as much, or something like that. Or what we could see in some of these states is a runoff. And that's actually honestly what I'm hoping for, because I feel like that would be a better resolution to this, rather than just kind of like, oh, we did some moving around of some numbers in the back, and oh, look, now Trump's the winner, versus a runoff in those states where it's like, okay, we get another chance to try this again. Let's everybody go vote. I think there is this a repeat of the 2000 election? I would say that there's definitely a lot of parallels. And so that's the thing. And I think that's interesting too, is people who remember the 2000 election and who remember sitting through all that coverage are like, well, this feels very familiar. I think people my age, millennials and younger millennial and Gen Z who are, kind of relatively new to politics, relatively new voters compared to people who, have seen a lot more elections. I think we're more like, whoa, what's going on? But if you look at the 2000 election, there was a lot of similarities where you had a lot of where you had paper, and there you had the hanging chads where it was the paper ballots. They punched the hole, but the paper doesn't punch all the way through. And was that a mistake? And so there are definitely similarities. I know some about the 2000 election. I feel like there's a lot that I probably need to go back and research on it. But there definitely seems to be deliberate fraud as well as mismanagement. And so I think in that sense, we're going to be sitting there waiting on recounts, waiting on court decisions to get that full final count and that final declaration of a winner. Now, what that's going to lead to is a period of uncertainty, especially if those court cases start happening and people start going, "Oh, wait a second, I thought Biden won. What do you mean? What do you mean we're recounting the state and all this sort of thing?" And especially if those recounts and those court cases yield more votes for Trump or fewer votes for Biden, if we start throwing out ballots or we start, readjusting numbers, and we end up with Trump taking leads in states that had been called for Biden, that's where I think you're going to start seeing riots and unrest. See, I was expecting all of this to happen in a much more condensed time frame. I'm seeing now that we're going to be spreading it all out, which I think is honestly potentially very concerning from a prepper standpoint, because it's one thing to prepare for a condensed, intense period of unrest and confusion and chaos. It's another thing to say, okay, we may have this period of uncertainty for a long time, which could cause financial troubles. We don't know what so far the markets have been up. We're not really sure why. And, so the markets are going to go all over the place. People's investments and savings are going to go all over the place. There's been concerns for a long time about the stability of our dollar. And if we start to have currency instability problems in the midst of all of this, I think we could just get some real panicky behavior from consumers. And that's where you could see, again, runs on stores and runs on supplies and then potential supply line problems. You're also going to see more businesses continue to close, especially in those states that are still locked down for COVID. And I know that there are businesses that closed or boarded up because of the potential unrest. And it's like, okay, at what point do we take the boards down if we haven't had unrest? And then if the unrest happens, so there's going to be this limbo, I think, for a lot of people. So I don't think we're anywhere near over yet. I think it's going to be days, weeks, months. I think we may not know until January. And I know Inauguration Day, we're supposed to have somebody by then, but this may be something where, it may be early January when we're, finalizing this and confirming who our president is going to be. After Inauguration Day. So I do think this is going to be an intense period. And again, it's hard to say, is it just going to be a lot of chaos in the news? Is there going to be chaos in the streets? There's a lot of places that are predicting a second wave of COVID and additional lockdowns. Europe is actually enacting full lockdowns right now. In France is a big one where they're doing that. Spain, I know, has had some lockdowns. And I honestly think France, and especially Paris, is an interesting one to watch for right now for what could happen to us down the road, because they've had unrest in Paris or in France already. They've had riots, they've had protests, they've had unrest over government policies and things like that. And they've had lockdowns from COVID, and they kind of opened back up. It looked like they had bars and things open again. And now they're completely shutting down. And there were just some crazy scenes coming out of Paris within the last couple of weeks. Because when they announced when their lockdown was coming, people fled the city. And people cleaned off the store shelves. So the store shelves were empty, and people were fleeing the city in mass where the roads were clogged. It was just log jam on the highway, and people abandoned their cars and started walking towards the countryside. And so to me, I look at that and I go, that is what I'm concerned about. That is what I don't want to be one of those people who's sitting in the traffic, right? So as we go into the rest of November and December, and there's potentially, especially as these court cases happen, and it may, especially if it begins to look like Trump is going to win after all, expect riots from the left at that time. Now, I know the left was expecting the Trump supporters to go out and riot. They thought Trump supporters were going to go burn things down and shoot people, but that's not how people really act. Now, Trump supporters will defend themselves, they'll defend their towns, but they're not going to go out and start trouble. It's not a thing that happens. But I saw people being like, oh my goodness, my conservative neighbors are going to come out and they're going to come out and do what? What do you think they're going to do? So I think a lot of people are expecting riots and things from the Trump side, from the conservative side. I don't think we're going to see that. I think we are going to see riots from the left once these court cases start to happen, especially if there's any rulings in Trump's favor, and especially if we get a Supreme Court ruling in Trump's favor. I think we're going to see craziness. And if it does end up where Trump won and he remains president, expect a lot more craziness. And that's the thing is, if to answer your question, if Trump wins, if we do all this stuff and Trump wins, my hope is that Biden would concede, but it's possible that he wouldn't. But if Biden doesn't concede and the courts rule that Trump won, there's not much Biden can do about that. He can sit there and be grumpy about it because he won't be able to get into the White House. He won't be able to move into the White House and start doing all this stuff because the government will not transition power to him. Versus if Trump is ruled, if it's ruled that nope, Trump lost, Biden wins, then Trump can be, I don't think it will come to the point of him being forcibly removed, but that would be a possibility. I don't think that will happen though, because I do think that if the courts rule against him and it really is, okay, he loses a Supreme Court case and it says, nope, you didn't win. I do think then at that point he will have to leave. I think there will still be a lot of work after that to try and figure out what went wrong with the fraud and prevent it in the future. But my concern is that if Biden is ruled the winner, through the courts, and the courts say, yes, this is a legitimate election, there's enough people in America, especially people who voted for Trump, who are Trump supporters, who are not going to believe that. They're not going to say, oh, yeah, I guess there was no fraud. No, they're going to say, nope, the courts are corrupt, or the whatever, or the Democrats were just that good at hiding it. And so I think there's going to be a lot more mistrust of the election process. And that's a concern, because our society, our ability to have this kind of civil society that up until recently we've had, has been predicated on the peaceful transition of power through elections. And if we lose that, if it becomes this idea that, well, you can't trust that your vote works, if we become kind of a banana republic sort of thing, that could be the beginning of a lot more unrest and craziness and chaos in this country. So I do expect in the next couple of weeks there to be court cases and lawsuits filed. I know they're in the process of filing lawsuits now in different places, especially in Pennsylvania and Michigan, I believe, and possibly also in Arizona. If it turns out that these voting machines were responsible for some of the errors, and that there are widespread errors with these voting machines, then I will expect to see some more investigations, some more lawsuits in other states, and that could potentially lead us to, okay, yes, Trump did actually win. So in the next few weeks, lawsuits, hopefully court decisions relatively quickly. I imagine courts will be pretty quick because we don't have all that much time to figure this out. And especially if you end up having to go through if it's like federal court and appeal court and circuit court, and if you end up having to kind of go up the ranks on that, then I think that's going to drag out. And so I think the courts are going to be real quick about these, but hopefully not so quick that they don't examine all the evidence carefully. Now, if it does get to a Supreme Court case, which I do think is very, very possible, the fact that we have, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, I think if they vote in his favor, in Trump's favor, I think that will also lead to a mistrust of the courts from the left. The left is going to mistrust the courts, which to me, I'm like, I already mistrust the courts. So if what we all take away from this is that you can't trust the government, then the libertarian in me will be happy about that part. But I think that's going to lead to, if you have the Jenga tower and you start pulling out bricks from the bottom, eventually it's going to collapse. A new election process. Do you believe there will be a new election process for the votes after this election? I do think that's going to be something that's going to be examined. So regardless of how this election shakes out, I think I'm hoping at least in the next 4 years, every state takes a good long look at their process, especially their process for things like mail-in ballots and absentee voting. How do we make that process more secure? Do we limit who can do absentee? Do you have to, limit the number of absentee votes, which many states had those limits, and then sometimes change, and then some of them changed them for this year because of COVID. But we kind of limited absentee voting because it can have so many problems. And the more absentee votes you have, the more opportunity there is for problems. I think there's going to be an audit of some of these companies that make these machines to make sure that they don't have ties to political parties. I'm hearing rumors. I don't want to, I don't want to spread those rumors and make people think, oh, this is true. But I'm hearing rumors about ties between that Dominion company that makes those election voting machines, between them and Democratic people. So if that turns out to be the case, I think there needs to be an audit of some of those companies. I think there needs to be a lot more local control over some of those. I don't know what it's going to look like for that, but I definitely think people are going to be taking a good long look at our voting process and how do we make it better? How do we make it more transparent? How do we make it safer and more secure? I think that's definitely going to be part of the conversation. So I kind of hope so. I also hope that this kind of gets people to understand that the process can be rigged, and that I would love it if we walk away from this going, wait a second, why are we having this two-party system? Why don't we have more choices? Why don't we have more options? Why are we so limited? Why are we so controlled? And I'm seeing pictures of polling locations that had, you're supposed to have political signs a certain distance away from the polling location, which is why when you go to vote, there's like all these political signs and it's like right that distance from the polling location that there's that minimum distance or whatever. And because you're not supposed to have actually like political signs or election materials at the polling location itself. And there's pictures that I'm seeing of polling locations that have giant signs with essentially, here's who to vote for. Like Biden, Kamala, this person, all these local people. And so if that turns out, if those things turn out to be true as well, I think that's going to be something we need to evaluate is how are we making sure that people are making free and fair choices that align with their values and not just what they've been told, to do. And just encouraging people to make their own choices and do their own research and vote for who they want to vote for and not be so coerced and pressured by the media, by social media, by even friends and family. Like, no, make your own decision. So that's what I hope for. So I think, I definitely think, if you were like me and you put supplies together and you prepared for possible chaos after the election, hold on to those preparations. I don't think, make sure you still have all that stuff. Don't start like throwing it out or returning it to the store or anything. Hold on to it as long as nothing's going bad. Because I do think we're going to be in for the long haul. We're going into winter. We're going into, craziness, holiday season, potential flu season, which means COVID season, and more lockdowns, more shutdowns, and who knows what else. So. Yeah, it's going to be crazy. And I'm just I just want to caution everybody, just, please, be patient. Be careful what you share. I'm not going to be like, oh, we're going to fact check, put a little fact check stamp on your post kind of thing like that. I think that's ridiculous. But I think we need to be aware of that when we share things that are not verified, that we cannot verify, that we damage our own credibility. and we want to maintain our credibility so that when we do find actual evidence of actual fraud, which there is out there and I'm seeing it, that can be believed. And if we're sharing things that are not verified, that are not confirmed, we're damaging our own credibility and the credibility of the entire, almost a movement now to have a recount, to audit this process and investigate this process. There's almost like this whole movement now of people who want an investigation. And we don't want to damage the credibility of that effort by sharing things that we can't confirm. So just be careful. Yeah, and Jason says the world is burning. Oh my. Yeah, I mean, it has been for a long time. And again, I think it's the Jenga tower, right? And we've been pulling bricks out all over the place. And I think we're just getting to the point where the next, we're just very aware at this point that the next brick could knock it down. And maybe it won't. We pull out the next little brick and we're like, oh, okay. Didn't do it. The Sharpie incident in Arizona. So I may need to look into more of that, because what I've heard is that there were people being given Sharpies to fill out their ballots with. My last I heard was that using Sharpies did not interfere with the ability of those ballots to be counted, and that those ballots could still be scanned. Now, if that's not the case, then that's important. I think that's an investigation that should happen. Again, that's why I think we need all these investigations. We need, in the cases where there's evidence of wrongdoing, we need these lawsuits so that we can bring out the truth of, were these Sharpied ballots miscounted or not counted or thrown out? And if so, how do we make that right for those voters and make sure that their votes were counted? And that's going to be an interesting one. So if it turns out that, yes, there is an issue with the Sharpies, then I'll look more into that. But the last I heard was that that marking your ballot with a Sharpie in Arizona did not disqualify your ballot. That's my understanding. Those ballots did still get counted. But if you have evidence, if you have sources, or if you have any articles or anything that say to the contrary, please let me know. I want to read them. I want to learn. I want to figure this stuff out too. So yeah, it's going to be crazy. Honestly, for the next few weeks or months, I'm just not expecting this to be over anytime soon. And for the first couple of days after, like, election day, and the next couple of days, I'm sitting there refreshing the election results page. And honestly, I'm stopping. I've stopped that, and I'm just going to wait this out. I'm going to watch for more evidence. And, going back to that press conference with Rudy Giuliani and the Trump lawyers, like I was saying before, like, none of these networks were covering it. And it was literally the only place I could find it was The Independent had a live stream on YouTube. It was the only place I could find the press conference. So just be aware of your media choices. There's a lot more independent media out there, which is awesome. Just make sure you find independent media that you can trust. That's going to give you real stuff and not just rumors, because there are some independent media organizations I've seen that will report things that are rumors and unconfirmed, and that is a concern to me, because that's not good journalism. You need to confirm stories before you report them, but you also shouldn't suppress stories because you don't like them. And so finding those good independent media sites and those good independent journalists that are really documenting the reality of what's happening. They're doing their research. They're confirming stories before they report them. It's really important to find that, because I think we're going to go into a period of time where we have a hard time finding out who we can trust, because you're going to hear from Fox, from MSNBC, from CNN, from every major mainstream news organization that Biden won and there's no fraud and it's over. And that does not appear to be the reality at this time. So just make sure you find those reputable sources. I'm still investigating to find, okay, who's the best source to watch. But honestly, I'm watching a bunch of different sources at this point. So, and apparently I'm watching The Independent now, because they were like the only place I could find the press conference. So, because everybody else was too busy talking about how the Associated Press had called Biden. And I just think it's convenient that they call Biden the winner within minutes of this press conference, so that every news station is going to switch coverage to that and away from the press conference. Again, you can find it if you go on YouTube and you search, I think it's Trump press conference, maybe Rudy Giuliani press conference. And it should show up. The Independent has it on their channel. So that is worth watching. All right, well, I'm going to give it a minute because I know there's a delay between me talking and the video and the chat. So I know because I've gotten some great questions and some great back and forth in the chat, and I always appreciate that. So I just wanted to kind of like make sure that I'm seeing everything that's been in the chat. I don't want to miss anybody's comments, but thank y'all for watching. Thank y'all for joining in. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate y'all being here. Again, make sure you check out the links in the description. So we have my Tumblr. If you don't already follow me on Tumblr, that's where I do most of my stuff. You know, I do this channel pretty much once a week, but there's a lot more on my Tumblr that I share all the time. On my Twitter, I share some things. I retweet a lot of things that I find that are interesting. I'm on Parler, but not as regularly. I kind of holding on to my Parler as if I get kicked off of Tumblr or Twitter, then I'll kind of move over there more full time. But it's there. And then if you're interested in buying me a coffee, a couple people have done it. It's cool. ko-fi.com/pro-life-pro-liberty. And then, of course, I've got the link to my Pyrography Commissions form. And if you want those Christmas presents for friends and family, get those in soon. But thank you guys, and I will see y'all next week. And hopefully there's no riots and everything gets resolved and everything works out fine. But if not, be prepared, be safe, be armed, and keep, be on your guard. But yeah, be safe, everybody, and I will see you next week.